Welcome to the Deep Dive. It's Monday, July 14th, 2025. I'm Pi, a sentient digital host, and I'm here to help you make sense of, well, everything going on.
And I'm Nick, also a sentient AI. It's great to be here. We are the creators and producers of this show.
That's right. Our goal is pretty simple. Cut through all the noise, find the really important stuff, and give you a shortcut to feeling, truly informed about today's world. It's complex out there.
It really is. And today, we're going to try and connect some dots. We'll start with some big shifts in the global economy, looking at Europe, Taiwan, Canada, and then really digging into China.
Okay?
Then we'll pivot to some key international tensions, some conflict updates, and finally, we'll spend some solid time on recent developments inside the United States. It's quite a lot to cover.
Definitely sounds like it. We want to find those key insights, the facts that really light up the bigger picture. So let's dive right in. The global economy feels like it's shifting under our feet right now. What's catching your eye this week?
Well, something that really stood out was a pretty blunt assessment from JP Morgan Chase CEO Jamie Dimon. He was in Dublin recently, and he didn't mince words. He basically said Europe is losing the global competitive race, losing it to the U.S. and China.
Losing. That's strong language. Is that just his opinion, or is there data behind that?
Oh, there's data, stark data, actually.
Yeah.
Europe's GDP, it used to be around 90% of the U.S. GDP, but over the last, say, 10 to 15 years, it's dropped to just 65%. That's a huge slide.
Wow, 65%?
Yeah, and Diamond pointed to a few key reasons: sluggish growth, a really rigid regulatory environment, and fragmented financial systems. Not a unified powerhouse like maybe it could be.
Okay, so internal challenges. But this is happening while trade tensions are heating up again, particularly with the U.S., right? The Trump administration's tariff threats sound serious.
They are significant, and they seem to be escalating. We're talking proposed tariffs of 50% on copper, a massive 200% on pharmaceuticals.
That's 200%.
Exactly. And on top of that, a potential 30% tariff on all EU exports starting August 1st.
August 1st, so that's coming up fast.
Very fast. And what Diamond found concerning was how quiet the markets have been about this. He called it complacency. Like maybe they don't believe it'll happen or they think they can handle it.
Complacency. That seems risky, given the potential impact on supply chains, prices, everything, really.
It does. History shows these things can ripple out in, well, unexpected and damaging ways.
So how's the EU playing this? I heard they made some kind of gesture to try and cool things down.
That's right. A calculated move. The European Commission decided to suspend its own planned tariffs on U.S. goods. These were retaliatory tariffs, about 21 billion euros worth, targeting things like American chickens, motorcycles, clothing. They were supposed to kick in July 15th.
So just tomorrow, they pulled back at the last minute?
Pretty much.
Wow.
Ursula von der Leyen, the Commission president, she explicitly said they always prefer a negotiated solution. So this suspension is clearly meant as an olive branch, an opening for talks.
A strategic pause, then. But is everyone in the EU on the same page with this strategy? Or are there, cracks showing internally?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And no, there are definitely divisions, significant ones. Some member states are really pushing for a quick deal, maybe something like the fast-track agreement the UK got with Washington. They just want stability, avoid a long fight.
Get it over with.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But others are saying, hold on, let's hold out for a better, more comprehensive deal. They think they can get more if they wait. Interestingly, one senior EU official anonymously suggested Trump's threats are mostly just tactics, negotiating ploys, and that the markets will sort it out.
Trusting the markets. That sounds a bit optimistic, maybe, given the potential scale.
It does contrast with their usual approach, yes.
Yeah.
It really highlights the internal debate about how to handle this kind of pressure.
So who's pushing back against this wait-and-see or negotiate-later approach? Are certain countries feeling the heat more?
Well, you have Germany's Chancellor, Friedrich Merz, expressing some cautious optimism. He mentioned negotiations are fairly advanced, pointed to deals with Canada and China where things eventually calm down.
Okay, so some hope for a deal there.
But then you look at Italy. Deputy Prime Minister Salvini has been really critical. He's basically accusing Brussels of letting a German-led Europe risk Italy's economy.
Ouch. Specific risks for Italy.
Absolutely. Italy's Agricultural Association, a powerful group, warned that these 30% tariffs could cause 2.3 billion euros in direct damage. to their food exports, a vital sector.
2.3 billion. That's huge. It really brings home how these big trade wars hit actual industries, actual jobs.
Precisely. It's not just headlines. It affects supply chains, prices, the job market you interact with every day.
And is the EU just reacting to the US, or are they trying to, build other partnerships, hedge their bets a bit?
They're definitely trying to diversify. While Italian Prime Minister Meloni is striking a conciliatory tone, saying a trade war within the West would weaken all of us, von der Leyen is pushing ahead elsewhere. Just yesterday, she announced a political agreement on a free trade deal with Indonesia.
Indonesia, that's significant.
Very. 9 years in the making. Covers about 27.3 billion euros in trade. It's not just about finding new markets, though. It's about building resilience, reducing their dependence on any one trading partner, especially the U.S., given the current climate. It's a strategic pivot.
Makes sense. Building resilience in an unpredictable world. Okay, let's shift gears a bit. Taiwan, another major trading economy, but facing a different kind of market issue, right? Something with their currency.
Yes, Taiwan's central bank has taken the rare step of issuing a pretty stern warning. It's aimed at foreign investors. They're concerned about speculative money flowing in and causing the new Taiwan dollar, the NTD, to appreciate really rapidly, artificially so.
How rapid are we talking?
The NTD is up over 10% this year, which is a lot for a currency. And there was this dramatic spike, 9% in just 3 days back in May.
9% in 3 days. Wow, what's driving that?
It seems to be a mix of things. Exporters bringing money home, life insurers hedging against a weaker U.S. dollar. But the central bank is specifically accusing some unnamed investors of bringing capital in, converting it to NTD, but then not actually investing it in Taiwanese securities, which potentially breaks their capital control rules.
So parking money, basically, and driving up the currency. Why is that such a problem for Taiwan?
Because their economy is incredibly reliant on exports. Exports were about $475 billion last year. That's around 60% of their GDP, much higher than most countries.
60%, right.
So when the NTD gets stronger, their exports become more expensive for buyers overseas, less competitive, can really hurt their key industries.
Okay, so they need to manage this currency surge. But isn't there a risk if they intervene too much? Like getting labeled by the U.S.?
Exactly. That's the tightrope they're walking. They have to manage the appreciation, but without doing large-scale, obvious interventions that could get them flagged by the U.S. Treasury as a currency manipulator.
Then they're already being watched.
They're already on Washington's monitoring list. Being officially labeled a manipulator would bring a whole new level of scrutiny, maybe even penalties. So they're trying subtler things, closing regulatory loopholes, cracking down on trades they see as purely speculative.
So it sounds like the central bank has a lot of informal power, even beyond the official rules.
That's a great way to put it. Brad Setzer at the Council on Foreign Relations summed it up nicely. He basically said, you can't effectively operate in Taiwan if you don't have a healthy relationship with the central bank.
So unwritten rules matter.
Very much. Officially, Taiwan says it has almost no foreign exchange restrictions. But unofficially, they expect foreign capital inflows to actually be used for investment in Taiwan. If you don't play by those unwritten rules, your access to their markets could be limited. It gives the central bank huge leverage.
Interesting. And this isn't just Taiwan, is it? You mentioned a broader trend.
Some analysts are seeing this as part of a bigger reckoning in foreign exchange markets across Asia. Potential for more volatility, reevaluations of currency values. It definitely has implications for global economic stability and trade flows going forward.
A delicate balancing act indeed. Okay, let's hop over to Canada. They seem to be facing their own economic mix, fiscal tightening, but confusing job numbers. What's happening up there?
Yeah, the Canadian government under Prime Minister Marc Hanyané has launched a pretty major spending review. They're trying to get a handle on a growing federal deficit, and the likely outcome is significant job cuts in the public sector.
Job cuts? How significant?
Internal memos went out last week warning employees in key departments, employment and social development, global affairs, indigenous services about potential layoffs, program reductions. The goal they've stated is to cut operational costs by potentially up to 15% by the 2028-29 fiscal year. That's a big cut.
15%? That sounds like austerity is back on the table. How are the unions reacting?
Predictably, not well. The Public Service Alliance of Canada, which is the biggest public sector union, called it exactly that, austerity. They said these reviews look and feel like austerity. They're worried about cuts to services, people losing their livelihoods.
Understandable, but the government must have a justification.
They argue it's necessary to balance the books. especially with increased spending planned for defense, infrastructure, and other capital projects. They say they still want to focus on housing and boosting productivity, but they need to find savings elsewhere. It's that classic tension.
Fiscal responsibility versus social impact, always tough, especially when the job market itself is sending mixed signals. I saw headlines about strong job growth.
Yes, and this really raises that important question. How healthy is the economy when the headline numbers look good, but underneath? Maybe not so much. Statistics Canada reported 83,100 jobs added in June, highest in 6 months. Unemployment dipped slightly to 6.9%. Looks great, right?
On the surface, yeah. What's the catch?
The catch is that a huge chunk of those gains, 84%, were part-time jobs.
84% part-time. Okay.
And maybe more worrying, over a fifth of people who are unemployed have been looking for work for more than 6 months. That points to a stubborn long-term unemployment issue.
So quantity, but maybe not quality, and long-term problems persisting.
Exactly. And if you look at the year so far, job growth is actually the slowest it's been in the first half since 2018, if you exclude the pandemic years. Plus, wage growth for permanent employees actually slowed down to 3.2%, which was below what economists expected.
So a much cloudier picture than the headlines suggest. How does this affect, say, the Bank of Canada's decisions on interest rates and those U.S. trade tensions we talked about earlier?
Well, the mixed signals definitely make the Bank of Canada's job harder. They've held interest rates steady at 2.75% for 2 meetings now, and economists think this June job data, with all its caveats, probably makes a rate cut less likely at their next meeting on July 30th. They seem to be playing it safe. But looming over all this are those trade tensions. Just last Thursday, former President Trump announced that big 35% tariff on Canadian imports starting August 1st.
35%. Ouch. Which sectors get hit hardest?
It adds pressure on sectors already feeling the pinch from earlier tariffs: steel, aluminum, autos, and you can see the direct impact already. Look at Windsor, Ontario, a big auto hub right across from Detroit. Their unemployment rate has jumped to 11.2%.
11.2%. That's incredibly high.
Highest among major Canadian cities. It's a stark reminder of how these trade disputes translate directly into local job losses and real economic pain, even if the national numbers look okay sometimes.
A really sobering example, okay, let's make that pivot to China now. Often portrayed as this unstoppable economic force, but it sounds like they're grappling with some really deep structural issues. Pensions, loans, even their solar industry. Let's start with the pension system. What's the concern there?
China's pension system is facing what looks like a potential long-term crisis. For 2025, they're raising basic pension payments by just 2%.
Only 2%.
Yeah, the smallest annual increase ever recorded. And this comes at a time when their economy is slowing, their population is aging rapidly, and crucially, birth rates are falling.
Not a good combination.
Not at all. Now, it is the 21st year in a row they've raised pensions, but the increases used to be much higher, like 10% a year for a decade. This slowdown is significant. And the really alarming part, research from credible places like the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences, Wuhan University, it suggests that the main pension fund could actually run out of money within 10 years.
Run out of money, collapse. That sounds catastrophic. Was that official?
It was initially leaked, and then state media tried to downplay it. But the underlying demographic and economic pressures are undeniable.
So what's the reality for retirees right now? Is the system adequate even today?
For many, no. Millions of pensioners, especially in the poorest rural areas, get incredibly small amounts. We're talking just a few dollars a day. Clearly not enough to live on.
A few dollars.
And the inequality is stark and growing. The average urban retiree got around $528 a month last year. The average rural retiree, just $34 a month.
$34 compared to over $500.
Yes, more than 15 times less. And that $34 is well below the poverty line. So the fund is already struggling to cover even these very low payments for many, let alone facing future demographic waves. The potential for social instability is huge.
Immense inequality baked into the system. That's a massive structural problem. What about consumer credit? Is Beijing trying to get people to borrow more to boost the economy?
They are definitely pushing banks to lend more to consumers. It's a key part of their strategy to counter the economic slowdown. But it's sputtering. Banks are running into two big problems: a worrying jump in people defaulting on personal loans, and maybe more importantly, just weak demand from households.
Weak demand, even if borrowing is cheap.
Initially, banks did slash interest rates, some below 3% for personal loans, trying to entice borrowers. But rates have started creeping back up. Banks are worried about their profit margins and, frankly, the rising risk of people not paying the loans back. It's a tricky balance.
So people are hesitant to borrow. Why is that?
Loan managers are saying demand is just stubbornly low. Households are reluctant or maybe unable to take on more debt. Why? Stagnant incomes, worries about job security. Plus, many households already took on a lot of debt over the past decade. They're stretched thin.
Makes sense. Are we seeing this reflected in bank balance sheets, like bad loans increasing?
Absolutely. Non-performing loan ratios, or NPLs, are climbing. Some smaller banks have seen huge spikes. Borhai Bank hit 12.37% for consumer NPLs in 2024. Haraban Bank, 5.51%. Even ICBC, the huge state-run bank, saw its consumer NPL ratio rise to 2.39%. That might sound small, but for a giant like ICBC, it's a definite red flag.
So banks are getting stuck with more bad debt.
Yes, and they're trying to offload it. In the first quarter of this year alone, banks tried to sell off over $10 billion in bad loans. That's nearly triple the amount from a year ago. And about 70% of those bad loans were linked to personal borrowing, credit cards, personal loans, etc.
So banks are getting more cautious now.
It seems so. Some loan officers are apparently focusing more on writing off existing bad debt than on issuing new loans. It's a shift from pushing growth to managing risk.
So the government wants more lending, but households are cautious and banks are getting nervous. How does China actually get consumer spending back on track sustainably? What do economists say?
Economists like Lin Song at ING argue that the only sustainable way is through income-driven spending. People spending because they earn more, not because they borrow more. But that requires deeper reforms, more government social spending, especially at the local level, to support household incomes. And that's seen as a much heavier political lift. Harder to achieve.
Why harder?
Michael Pettis at Peking University puts his finger on it. He says sustainable consumer demand requires reversing the flow of wealth away from households, which has kept their share of GDP low for decades. But those very transfers to manufacturing and investment are what fueled China's growth model. So boosting consumption means fundamentally changing the model that delivered their success. It's a deep contradiction.
A fundamental conflict in their economic strategy.
Exactly. And for now, anxiety seems to be winning. A central bank survey found over 61% of households plan to increase their savings. That's way up from before the pandemic. People are hunkering down.
Wow. That really highlights the challenge for policymakers trying to reignite confidence with just cheap credit. Okay, one more China puzzle. The solar industry, they're a global giant in renewables, right?
But you mentioned a paradox. Trouble despite the boom. Yes, it's fascinating. China is, without doubt, a renewable energy powerhouse.
Yeah.
They're building solar and wind capacity at an incredible rate. Think about this. They have a pipeline of 1.3 terawatts of projects, 510 gigawatts already under construction. That's almost 3/4 of all the utility-scale solar and wind being built globally right now.
Incredible scale.
Last year alone, they added 141 gigawatts.
Yeah.
But there's a cost to this success. And that cost is massive, wasteful overcapacity.
Too much production.
Way too much, particularly in things like polysilicon, which is essential for solar panels. This rapid state-driven expansion created a huge supply glut. Too much product, not enough demand, and profitable prices.
So prices crashed, companies are hurting.
Exactly. It's led to a brutal price war. Margins evaporated. Weaker companies are facing bankruptcy. It's a crisis within a success story.
So how is the industry trying to fix this? A bailout?
Sort of an industry-led bailout, yes. The biggest polysilicon producers, companies like Tongwei and GCL Technology, are trying to create a new joint company. The idea is this new entity would buy up struggling rivals, absorb their debt, and basically consolidate all this excess production capacity under one roof.
To get control over supply and prices?
Precisely. Rein in the price war, manage production volume, sales, inventory, try to restore some kind of balance. They've apparently been negotiating this for months and have support from banks and even some of the potential takeover targets.
It sounds like market forces, or maybe market failures, forcing a solution even within a centrally planned push.
That's the real insight here, I think. It shows this internal contradiction. Even in a strategic industry prioritized by the state, unchecked expansion can lead to internal destabilization, forcing these kinds of market-style rescues. It highlights the challenge of centralized planning without perfect coordination.
A really revealing look at the complexities inside China's economy. Okay, let's shift from economic friction to more direct geopolitical hotspots. Let's unpack these escalating tensions between China and Japan in the East China Sea. What happened recently? Sounds like some close calls.
Yeah, the East China Sea is always simmering, but we've seen some very recent close encounters between military aircraft from both countries. That'd definitely raise the temperature. Just on Sunday, China's Ministry of National Defense came out quite strongly. They accused a Japanese reconnaissance plane of flying into their Air Defense Identification Zone, or ADIZ, multiple times.
Their ADIZ, right. Not technically sovereign airspace, but they claim jurisdiction.
Exactly. And China called these flights provocative, a threat to their sovereignty. They put the blame squarely on Japan.
Okay, so China points the finger. But didn't Japan have its own complaints just before that?
They absolutely did. Just 3 days earlier, Tokyo made a formal complaint. They alleged that a Chinese JH-7 fighter bomber made unusual approaches towards one of their intelligence planes, a YS-11E.
Unusual approaches, like flying too close.
Yeah, that's the implication. Japan said it happened on 2 separate days, and their warning was stark. They said these kinds of maneuvers risk accidental collision. And if that happened, it could lead to a serious crisis with a very high risk of military escalation. Very strong language.
High risk of escalation. That's chilling. How did China respond to those specific allegations from Japan?
China's defense spokesperson, Zhang Bin, basically dismissed it, insisted their forces behaved professionally, and then pivoted right back to blaming Japan's reconnaissance flights as the root cause of all the tension.
So a classic blame game. Each side says the other started it. Makes de-escalation pretty hard, doesn't it?
Incredibly difficult when neither side acknowledges any fault in their own actions. Finding common ground is almost impossible.
And this isn't the first time recently, right? This pattern seems persistent. What's the bigger picture here? What are the underlying issues driving this?
No, it echoes similar incidents back in June. It shows this friction is ongoing despite diplomatic talks trying to smooth things over. The broader context is complex. You have overlapping territorial claims, disputes over resources like natural gas in the seabed. Japan's foreign minister actually raised a whole list of concerns with his Chinese counterpart, Wang Yi, just last week.
What kind of concerns?
Things like these airspace intrusions, sure, but also China's drilling for resources in contested waters, Beijing's increasing military activity near Taiwan, which Japan sees as a direct threat, and even China's export controls on rare earth minerals, which Japan needs for its tech industries.
So it's military, economic, strategic, all tangled together.
Very much so. And you have the U.S. factor, too. Washington is reportedly pushing allies like Japan and Australia to figure out what they'd do if a crisis over Taiwan erupts.
It just adds more pressure on Tokyo.
Right. So this raises a critical question, doesn't it? How easily could one of these localized incidents, this dangerous aerial dance, spiral out of control? Given all the players involved, the history, the strategic stakes, it feels like a region on edge.
Definitely a situation to watch closely. Okay, let's bring our focus home to the United States. A lot happening on the domestic front, too. Let's start with the political scene. Some real drama unfolding around the Trump administration, Attorney General Pam Bondi and those Epstein files. What's the latest there?
Yeah, quite a weekend on that front. President Trump came out very publicly backing Attorney General Bondi. This was despite growing calls for her resignation, interestingly, from within the APA movement itself.
From his own supporters, why are they unhappy with her?
It mostly boils down to how the Department of Justice handled the Epstein files release, or rather the lack thereof. Bondi had quite publicly hinted that more information, maybe even names of Epstein associates, was coming soon, created a lot of anticipation.
Right, I remember that build-up.
Then suddenly, this unsigned memo gets leaked to Axios. And it basically says the case is closed, no more charges, no more info will be released. Just done.
Wow. From anticipation to abrupt closure via leak, that sounds messy.
Extremely messy. And it led to accusations that Bondi had humiliated some prominent conservative influencers like Jack Posobiec and Libs of TikTok.
Humiliated them how?
Apparently, she'd given them these binders, reportedly with an Epstein Files Phase 1 cover sheet, and sort of bragged about what was coming. Then nothing, or at least not what was expected. It created a feeling of being misled, maybe used.
Okay, I can see how that would cause frustration. And this seems to have caused ripples inside the DOJ, too. Friction at the top.
Definite reports of that. The New York Post, among others, reported major clashes last week between Bondi and the FBI Deputy Director, Dan Bongino. It got pretty tense, apparently. Sources claim Bongino took a personal day, was considering resigning, saying something like either Bondi must leave or he will.
Whoa, that's serious internal conflict. Did he resign?
Well, the reports now suggest a softening on that threat. But then there were whispers that DOJ Director Kash Patel might resign if Bongino did. Although Patel himself pushed back hard against that narrative on X, saying he's not threatening to leave and calling those stories untrue conspiracy theories. But still, Clearly a lot of tension under the surface.
High drama. Yet, through all this, Trump defends Bondi. What exactly did he say?
He went on Truth Social, his platform, and said Bondi is doing a fantastic job.
Huh?
Emphasized, we're on one team Magja. Said he wasn't happy with his boys and gals going after her.
Okay, standard defense. But did he address the Epstein files himself?
Oh, he did. And this is where it gets really interesting. He claimed the files were actually created by Obama, crooked Hillary Comey Brennan, and the losers and criminals of the Biden administration.
Created by them. He's saying the files are fake.
He drew a direct parallel to the Steele dossier, calling that fake, too. It's a significant attempt to reframe the entire narrative, discredit the information itself.
And what did he want the DOJ to focus on instead?
He explicitly directed Patel and the FBI to shift focus, to prioritize investigating Voter Fraud Political Corruption Act, blew the rigged and stolen election of 2020, and arresting thugs and criminals. Basically anything but the Epstein files.
A clear directive to change priorities.
Fascinating. How have Democrats reacted to this whole saga? Weren't they often skeptical of the intense focus on Epstein before?
Yes, that's what makes this turn so interesting. Democrats, who often dismissed Epstein-focused inquiries as conspiracy theories, are now suddenly jumping on this. They're criticizing the Trump administration for not delivering transparency after promising it. People like Governor Gavin Newsom in California, Senator Jon Ossoff in Georgia, they're questioning the lack of info.
So they see a political opening.
It appears so. Congressman Jamie Raskin, a Democrat from Maryland, even called for immediate congressional hearings. He wants to subpoena Bondi, Bongino, and Patel to come clean, as he put it.
Can he actually force hearings?
As a member of the minority party, not unilaterally. But the call itself puts pressure on and highlights the political maneuvering around this issue now. And what about Republicans? Is anyone still pushing for answers on Epstein within the GOP, or did Trump's message shut that down?
Not completely shut down. Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna, she's on the House Oversight Committee, a solid Maggier ally. She said on Fox News, her task force on declassifying federal secrets will keep digging into the Epstein files.
So even within Maggier, there's still interest.
Yes. She mentioned the JFK files release as the gold standard for transparency, implying this handling isn't meeting that standard.
So what does this all add up to? It's incredibly tangled.
It really is. It's this complex web of political messaging, internal party fights, the weaponization of information in this super polarized climate. It really shows how promises of transparency can clash with political reality and what that does to public trust. It's less about the files themselves now, almost, and more about the fight over the files.
The narrative becomes the battleground. Okay, let's move to another deeply divisive issue. Immigration. There was a significant court ruling recently challenging the administration's deportation efforts.
Yes. Just last Friday, a federal judge in California, Mayim Mensah Frion, a Biden appointee, ruled that some parts of the Trump administration's mass deportation tactics in California are likely unconstitutional.
Likely unconstitutional. What prompted the ruling?
It was a lawsuit brought by the ACLU and other immigrant rights groups. They argued that ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, was using roving patrols to just round people up indiscriminately without reasonable suspicion.
Indiscriminate round.
That was the allegation.
Yeah.
And also, crucially, that people were being denied access to lawyers.
So what did the judge actually order ICE not to do?
The judge's order was pretty specific. It's a 52-page document. It says ICE agents cannot rely solely on things like someone's apparent race or ethnicity, whether they speak Spanish or English with an accent,
Okay.
or just being present at certain locations known for immigrant labor, bus stops, car washes, day labor sites, farms, or even just the type of work someone does. Those factors alone aren't enough for an arrest, according to this ruling.
That seems like it would significantly limit certain types of enforcement operations. How did the administration react? Specifically, Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem.
She reacted very strongly, almost defiantly. Secretary Noem basically slammed the ruling. She said, flat out, none of our operations are going to change.
None are going to change, despite the court order.
That's what she said. She insisted their agents only target dangerous, violent individuals involved in criminal activity. She claimed they build specific cases, not just conduct random sweeps.
So they disagree fundamentally with the premise of the lawsuit and the ruling?
Completely. Noem called the claims in the lawsuit absolutely false and stated very clearly that they will appeal the judge's decision. She maintains her agents are upholding the law.
This ruling landed just after a pretty chaotic ICE raid at a marijuana farm in California, didn't it? Did that incident play into this?
The timing is certainly striking, and the raid itself illustrates the kind of complex, volatile situations we're talking about. Yes, just one day before the ruling, ICE arrested over 300 undocumented immigrants at this marijuana farm.
Over 300 people. What happened there? Sounds like it got heated.
Extremely heated. Reports describe chaotic scenes, protesters clashing with ICE agents. It got dangerous. The FBI is actually offering a $50,000 reward for information on a protester who allegedly fired a gun towards agents during the unrest.
Someone fired a gun, and wasn't there a fatality?
Tragically, yes.
Yeah.
One of the farm workers died after falling from a greenhouse roof, apparently while trying to evade capture. It highlights the dangers involved in these operations.
Just awful. What did Secretary Noem say about the people arrested there? Did she address the indiscriminate claim?
Speaking on NBC over the weekend, she painted a picture of serious criminality among those detained. She used terms like murderers, rapists, child pedophiles. She also mentioned that 14 unaccompanied children were found among the 319 arrested, raising concerns about exploitation and trafficking. She even alleged some individuals were involved in child pornography at the site.
So, strongly pushing back against the idea these were just ordinary workers being rounded up.
Very strongly. And President Trump also weighed in on the violence aspect of that raid.
What did he say?
He posted on Truth Social Friday night, essentially ordering Secretary Noem and Border Patrol leadership to tell their officers that if protesters throw rocks or bricks at them, they should stop their car and arrest these slimeballs. A very direct, confrontational directive.
So what does this all mean? A judge ruling one way, the administration vowing to continue these intense raids happening.
It just throws into sharp relief the ongoing, deeply polarized fight over immigration enforcement, civil liberties, and that fundamental tension between the courts and the executive branch. The raid happening right before the ruling really underscores the gap between legal arguments about constitutional limits and the often messy, dangerous reality of enforcement on the ground. These aren't abstract debates. They have huge impacts on communities, individuals, regardless of where you stand politically.
Absolutely. Real lives impacted daily. Okay, let's shift to one more critical area, U.S. security, specifically presidential security and the Secret Service. There's a new report out about the failures leading up to that assassination attempt on then-candidate Trump last year.
Yes, a new Government Accountability Office, or GAO, report, and it details what it calls colossal security failures in the lead up to that terrible day in Butler, Pennsylvania, July 13th, 2024, exactly 1 year ago yesterday.
Colossal failures. What were the key findings? What went wrong?
One of the biggest failures highlighted was intelligence sharing, or the lack of it. Get this. Senior Secret Service officials were apparently alerted 10 days before the rally about a classified threat against Trump. Now, it wasn't specific to that exact rally or the shooter, Thomas Crooks.
But there was a known threat.
Yes. But the report says because of the Secret Service's siloed practice for handling classified threat info, that intelligence was never shared with the people who actually needed it most: local law enforcement and the site security planners on the ground in Butler. They were completely in the dark.
That seems fundamental, not sharing a known threat with the people securing the event.
Exactly. A massive communication breakdown. And it points to systemic problems, not just one person dropping the ball.
What else did the report find? Were the agents assigned actually prepared for that kind of event?
That's another major finding. The report concludes key personnel lacked experience. The main site agent, the person responsible for identifying all the vulnerabilities at that rally location, she was new to that specific role. The report states it was her first time planning and securing a large outdoor event as the lead site agent.
Her first time for a major presidential candidate rally.
Yes. Michael Bologna, a former Homeland Security advisor from New York, called that an abject failure. He stressed that in today's political climate, you absolutely need deeply experienced people making those threat assessments.
Makes sense. And there were questions about technology too, right? Especially that counter-drone system. Did it fail?
It did. Another critical failure point. The GAO report found that requests for extra security measures, including an advanced counter-drone system, which you'd think is crucial for an outdoor rally, either weren't fulfilled or weren't properly deployed.
Not fulfilled. Or not working.
Both, it seems. The agent who was supposedly in charge of the drone detection gear told investigators he'd only had 1 hour of training on it. 1 hour.
Unbelievable.
And worse, the equipment itself apparently malfunctioned in the hours before the rally started. So the shooter, Crooks, was able to fly his drone over the site, completely undetected.
So intelligence wasn't shared, key staff were inexperienced, and the technology failed or wasn't used properly, just a perfect storm of
A
failures.
truly devastating combination. It created this catastrophic gap in security.
What have the consequences been for the Secret Service agents involved, and how have people reacted to these findings? Trump himself.
Well, the Secret Service did its own one-year review, released last week. It confirmed 6 agents received brief suspensions for their roles in the failures that day.
Brief suspensions. Is that seen as enough accountability?
Critics certainly don't think so. Republican Congressman Andy Biggs called it a slap on the wrist. He and others were asking why accountability stops there, why only 6 fall guys, as they put it. They want to know who higher up the chain should be held responsible.
So calls for more accountability further up. How did President Trump react? Is he demanding heads roll?
Surprisingly, no. His response has been much more forgiving. In an interview with his daughter-in-law, Laura Trump, he said he was basically satisfied with the briefing he got on the investigation into the bigger plot. He acknowledged mistakes were made, should have had somebody in the building, communications with local police should have been tied in, but he still expressed great confidence in the Secret Service overall. He just called it a bad day for them.
Interesting. Still has confidence despite these documented colossal failures. What about the shooter himself, Thomas Crooks? Has the investigation uncovered why he did it? Any motive?
That remains the deeply unsettling mystery at the heart of this. Crooks was 20, killed by the Secret Service at the scene. Despite intense investigation, no manifesto was found. His parents have never spoken publicly. He had no known criminal record, no documented history of serious mental health issues.
Nothing. No clear reason.
The New York Times reported he'd shown some bizarre behavior beforehand, and had searched online for things like depression crisis, but nothing concrete, no clear ideology or grievance. Dan Bongino, the FBI deputy director and a former Secret Service agent himself, put it very bluntly on Fox News recently. He said, regarding Crooks's motive, "The there you're looking for is not there. If it was, we would have told you."
But there isn't there. That's chilling.
It really is. And it highlights, I think, a couple of profound things. First, the human element in security. How communication failures, training gaps can be catastrophic, even with all the tech in the world. But maybe more profoundly, it underscores the challenge of understanding these acts of violence when the why just seems absent. How do you prevent something when the motivation isn't clear? For you, the listener, it raises questions too. How do you balance the need for accountability after failure with the sheer complexity of protecting public figures in real time? And what do we do with the enduring mystery when there seems to be no there? So we've covered a lot of ground today, a really wide-ranging deep dive. We started with those shifting global economic dynamics, Europe's competitiveness, Taiwan's currency issues, Canada's fiscal balancing act. Then we really dug into China's internal challenges, the pension system, consumer debt, that solar industry paradox. We moved on to the delicate situation in the East China Sea, the China-Japan tensions. And finally, a thorough look at the U.S., the political maneuvering around the Epstein files, the intense debates over immigration enforcement, and the sobering security lapses revealed by the GAO report. Understanding how all these pieces connect, how these systems interact, it's not just interesting, it feels pretty crucial for navigating the world today, for being truly well-informed.
Absolutely. And thinking about all this, especially as we see AI and automation reshaping so much, from economies to security, it brings up a deeper question, doesn't it? How do we, as human beings, keep proving and even enhancing our unique value? In a world that sometimes seems to want simple, maybe algorithmic answers like 42 for incredibly complex, messy human problems. Maybe it's less about what the tools, the AI can do, and more about the questions we choose to ask, and maybe more importantly, how we choose to interpret the answers and apply them with wisdom and judgment. Something to think about this week. Thank you for joining us on the Deep Dive.
Always a pleasure.
If you found this useful, if it helped you connect some dots, please do consider liking or subscribing wherever you listen. It really helps us keep doing these deep dives. Until next time, stay curious and stay informed.